Hey friends, welcome back to the Real Herbalist podcast. In this podcast, I talk to real people who are joyfully playing with herbs and plants in their home. And I hope to demystify herbalism as something that's difficult or scary and remind you that you already are a natural born herbalist. An herbalist is simply a human being that plays with herbs or plants and herbs. My name is Erin McMurtry, and I'm a health coach, a home herbalist, an artist, and I'm excited to introduce you to some of my friends. Today, we're talking with Samantha. Yay! And she is a real herbalist. So, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here, and I love hearing you read the intro because I was just sharing with Erin. I was like, oh no, I can't like rattle off all these facts and different things, but I do. I love to learn, and I feel very novice where I'm at with my understanding of the depth of knowledge that I have with plants, but they're just so fun to connect with. So I loved hearing how you're wanting to really demystify it because I couldn't agree more. And the more that we're just willing to play, because it's such an intuitive thing, the more that you dive into it, it just opens a whole new world. So I can't wait.
Yay! I know, I love that. I'm just it's perfect exactly where you are. And I love that you're here. And I love that you can just speak from your joy of experience. And that's exactly perfect. So, and also, we've done this a couple of times. I think I interviewed you for one of my older podcasts. I've been on your podcast, and we always just have so much fun. So I'm so happy that you're here. I'm happy to be with you. Samantha lives in Michigan, so we don't get to be with each other a whole lot. So yeah, just thank you for being here. And I'll just share briefly. So we met, for those that are listening,
So
years
long ago.
ago. When was that?
2014, and the only reason that I know that like so well off the top of my head is because that's when I moved to San Diego for the first time.
Yes. Okay. So 2014, we met at a live event. We used to we were both students at a company called Holistic MBA that did advanced training for health coaches. And so that's where we met. We actually both ended up working for the company later. But that's where we met, and we went to some live events together and took some road trips together, and just always end up having fun. So we've gone deep with many coaching exercises, and we've just gone deep into the transformational world together. So it's just so fun to have you here. And yeah, I'd love for you to just share a little bit about who you are, where you live, what you do, all the things, anything that you might think would be helpful for people to know about you.
So, my name's Samantha. As Erin said, I'm a holistic life and embodiment coach, and I really work to help people reconnect to their body, connect to their intuition, connect to the trust, and really learning to advocate for themselves. And I do a lot of that through movement and embodiment work as well as toxin free living, because it's hard to really connect to our body when we're putting chemical inputs in, and everything's a chemical, right? But toxic chemicals that are causing our chemistry to kind of roller coaster. It's hard to really know where we're at. So I have so much fun really helping women with that. And a lot of that came from learning how to manage burnout and chronic inflammation in my own body.
Yes, you've been on the healing path a long time. And I know we've bonded over so many different things. And, we talked about essential oils. I know you were really into essential oils. I've seen on your Instagram, like, I love watching you boil herbs in a pot. And I remember I wrote you one time and I'm like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing with that? And you were explaining to me that it was just literally to create like the yumminess of the herbs in the air and bring moisture into the air and stuff. So I look at you as someone who is doing lots of creative things with plants.
Oh, thank you. And isn't that so funny, right? We have totally different perspectives on ourselves. And this is something that I'm learning to embody more of myself. But I grew up that math science was like what we should hold in high esteem. And so I would never refer to myself as a creative person. And even as of, the past few weeks, I have been challenging that belief within myself that I'm not a creative person, because there's so many ways that we can be creative. And I was always of the mindset that even an accountant is creative in their own way. It might not be art and painting and all the things, but it's how do we interact with life? And I think that's kind of the new reframe that I'm taking with creativity, at least for myself.
To me, it's similar to herbalism, right? Like, we're all creative and we're also all herbalists. Like, we're all using plants, we're all eating plants, like we're all cooking with plants. It's just so funny how we think that these things mean like something big and fancy and like, ooh, I got to be like a painter or a, you know, like we have an idea of what something means and then we cut off our connection with that thing. So I just love that you're embracing creativity. I completely see you as a creative person. And yeah, I'm just so excited to learn more about your journey with connecting with the plants.
One of the first ways that, because when you were talking about it, I was like, oh, that's like one of the first ways that I really connected. And it was through cooking. And so I love to cook and I love to not necessarily follow a recipe. And one of the ways that I would always do that is smelling the spices. And I would just hold them together and I'd be like, ooh, that smells good. That's going to taste good. And so I would cook based on scent and what I was picking up from the different herbs. And I wouldn't necessarily know like these are Italian herbs, these are these kind of herbs and spices. I was just like, this smells good, it's going towards the direction that I want it to go, like let's keep going. And that was kind of the first way that I would say, because we didn't really grow up gardening or anything like that, so that was one of the first big ways that I started to play with herbalism.
Mm, yes, I love it. There are so many beautiful herbs and spices to use for cooking. And it is such a fun way to get creative with food and enhance the medicinal properties and the nutritional properties of what you're eating. So you feel like your first connection was working with plants and herbs and spices in the kitchen. Then where did your journey take you with plants and
I'd say the next biggest one for me was essential oils. And I found essential oils when I was 18 and it was a whole new world. So this was about 11 years ago now. And I think for me the first part was I was so confused because there's not necessarily you get a bottle that says take one drop each morning behind your left ear and like you're good, right? Like we're used to many of us are used to getting prescriptions from a doctor that says take 2 pills once a day for however long. And it's like very rigid and regimented of like, this is how you use this. And I felt like as soon as I was handed essential oils, it was like, there's a plethora of things that they can help you with. There's really no rule book to follow. Yes, there's guidance and there's kind of practices out there, but it felt so overwhelming to me because there wasn't that like very like equation based, this is how you use this. And so I started off with a little intro kit of lemon, lavender, and peppermint, like 3 core ones that anybody can use and have just such a range of purposes. And I remember putting a drop in my water because if you have a certain grade of essential oil, you can ingest them. And so I put a drop in and I drank it. And very quickly, all of a sudden, my stomach was ready to kind of like purge and release some things. And I was like, that was really potent and intense. And I put them in a drawer for like 6 months until I went to a lavender festival here in Michigan. And the same girl who had sold me those oils had a booth there as well. And it was a much bigger booth, a lot more individuals that sold oils. And so I like got to dive in and talk and like see that they made bath bombs and like they were using them in so many different ways. And then obviously they were so comfortable and confident using them that they're like, oh, here's like all the different ways that you can do it. And I was like, okay. So I felt like the first one was like the introduction, feel the overwhelm, kind of tiptoe. And then a couple months later, it was like, okay, now I'm ready to really start exploring this. And I had a book and I just started playing and kind of took it from there.
wow, that's so interesting that your body had that response.
It
Was
was
it
fast.
the lemon?
Yep.
Wow. Did they offer you any explanation around that?
I didn't talk to them about it because it was like such a long window apart. But I mean, my biggest idea that I would say is I just had um something in me that wanted to get out. And as soon as the lemon and the pH balancing and all the things kind of came together, my body's like, and we're ready to release you.
Wow. That's interesting. I've never had an experience with essential oils like that. That's a pretty strong way to start your relationship with
Well, that's what
essential
I mean.
oils.
Like it felt so strong, and that's where usually with essential oils, generally speaking, you won't get such like a potent, intense reaction. I think if everybody did, so many more people wouldn't use them, or they'd be a
Right.
little bit more shy with using them. But yeah, I think that's why I was like, "Ooh, I really got to learn how to use these and like put them in a drawer."
So once you connected with your friend and had a little bit more inspiration and guidance around how to use the oils, what other creative ways did you go about using them?
Oh man. So when I lived in San Diego, I had created a bath and body line. So I made bath teas, bath salts, and I did laundry detergent. I did body butters and sugar scrubs. And so in all of those, I would use different herbs and I would use essential oils. So it's fun because I was like, oh, right, here's another way that I was kind of naturally pulling them in that, we don't think of ourselves as herbalists and whatnot, but it's like we get to incorporate them in our everyday life, and probably more of us are using them more than we would think that we are, because we, again, like Aaron was saying, we kind of have this idea of what it is, and then there's like, oh, that's out there and I'm right here. So I started to make products with them. I can cook with them occasionally, but a lot of what I would use them for was emotional support. I have a background and history with really bad anxiety and depression. So that was one of the first areas that I used them for, as well as I have a lot of chronic inflammation that I was managing. And so that was another core area that I was using them for.
Mm. So for those that are listening that maybe don't know, can you give an example of how you would use the essential oils to support you with anxiety?
hmm So, one of the best ways that you can use essential oils for emotional support is through aromatherapy and inhaling them. Because when we inhale them and we use our olfactory system, which is our sense of smell, it's got a direct connection to our limbic system, which is our emotional center. And so, the chemistry of the oils and kind of the volatile aromatic compounds that when as soon as you open the bottle and like that scent goes up, it sends signals to our brain to help kind of shift and release different chemical reactions to create a different relaxed response in our body. And not always relaxed, but with the essential oils that I was using for emotional support, it would cause this just like wave of this settling. And that was what was so cool to me, was it was so quick. Like literally just smelling and that sense going directly up, I could immediately feel a sense of calm wash over me. And it might not have taken me from a 10 to a 1, but it could take me from like a 10 to a 9 to then starting to use some other techniques, whether that's tapping, breath work, movement, etc. It could take me down and down and down and down. And then that essential oil would really just kind of open the door of like, we don't have to keep going up. We can start to kind of calm this down.
Yeah, awesome. So what I'm like thinking of when you're sharing this is nervine herbs, which help calm the nerves. So that would be herbs like lavender, chamomile, rose. I think peppermint is a nervine herb as well. What other herbs oils would you use for calming?
Mhm. Helichrysum is actually
Oh,
a really great one. I've always used that one really for skin. Was It's funny because like when you start using oils, you find like the one thing that you know that they're for, and you kind of keep using them for that. But they have such a range that you can use them for. So one of my friends was talking about how great it was for emotional support, and I was like, I've never really used helichrysum for emotional support. And so, especially within this last week, my grandma was in the hospital. And so I was using it. I was like right under the nose, and I could just feel a sense of calm wash over me. Lavender is a huge one. I have one, it's called Balance. It's a combination of a couple of them. And I'm like, I wish I had it right next to me so I could read out what they are. But also, other great ones for emotional support are like trees or long grasses because they've got these really long roots. So that's another cool way to think of them. And even, have you ever seen those? I'm sure you have, Aaron, but I'm curious for anyone listening. Those images where it'll show like a walnut and a brain or a carrot and an eye. And it shows how food and things that they have the nutrients to best support the organs in our body that kind of look like it. And
Totally.
so when you think of trees, they're very sturdy, they're very rooted. And so when we use those same essential oils, there is this sense of like strong rooted calm that can wash over us.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I love that. I feel so connected with trees. I've used a lot of Young Living. I know you've used a lot of doTERRA. So the Young Living ones that I've used that are like tree ones, Northern Lights black spruce. Then there's an Idaho blue spruce. There's one called Grounding, which has like, I think sage and just like other ones in it. But I totally agree. Like for me, the tree ones just feel like I'm in the middle of a forest and just like my whole system just roots down. And yeah, like my awareness goes into my roots, my feet, my roots.
Mhm.
Same thing with the nervous system. Like, I love that you were sharing about how like the walnut in the brain, like those images, but also the nervous system like looks like a tree as well, right? Like all of the nerves in our body looks like roots.
It's so beautiful. Like when you see the anatomy of the body behind the layer of skin, it is so cool how intelligent it is. And the same, that's kind of one of the things that really connected me, not necessarily to plants, but just that sense of oneness is A, we're made from the same elements that plants and nature are made from, but just that the same intelligence that allows a tree to grow from a little seed into a beautiful massive oak tree or what have you is the same intelligence that takes us from this little embryo into a full-fledged human being.
It's so amazing. And I think that's one of the beautiful things too about playing with plants and herbs is that you do start to connect with this innate intelligence of, you know, the earth and all of like the creative force that lives in everything and in our bodies and in everything in nature. And it's just like, how can you not be blown away and humbled by, spirit, God, life force, whatever word you want to give it. It's like the breath of life. So you mentioned Helichrysum, and so I wanted to bring this up because Helichrysum is one of the plants that I connected with too through essential oils. And because I started really, I was into oils for the skin. So that was kind of where I got interested in essential oils. And so Helichrysum is like, as you said, it's like one of the main, most famous ones for the skin. And except it's like $120 for like a tiny 5 milliliter bottle. So I did end up buying a bottle and trying it, and it was beautiful. It has this very like velvety texture, almost like myrrh. I found it similar to myrrh in that
That
way.
one is thick.
Yeah. So, but I wanted to say for anybody who's interested or has used Helichrysum oil or wants to explore it, I would suggest this is my Helichrysum hack. Buy yourself some Helichrysum flowers. So I got a 4-ounce bag of flowers, of Helichrysum flowers from Mountain Rose Herbs for like $20. And you can just take the flowers and pour oil over it and let it infuse for 4 to 6 weeks. You can blend it up if you want, but you can make your own Helichrysum infused oil, and it is one of the most beautiful infused oils I've ever made. I actually have a video about how to do it and the benefits and stuff on my YouTube channel. So since you mentioned Helichrysum, I had to just throw that in there, that it is a magical plant and that you can actually make your own for like $20 or less. So
That is huge. And I was going to say, anytime I see you post about your infusion of helichrysum, it is just magical looking. It's like this gold shimmery. Oh, it's so pretty. So I have not yet bought me some flowers. So this was my reminder to do that as well because
oh
I've
yeah.
been wanting to do that since I saw you post it and I just keep forgetting to buy it.
Yeah, save yourself $100
Seriously.
and make yourself some oil for like a year for $20. And it is, oh
Oh
my
my
God, the smell
goodness.
of it.
The
Go,
nerve benefits that you get from putting it on your skin.
oh
Like,
gosh. And so also I want to recommend that to anybody who has really oily skin. I find that the Helichrysum oil, it has sort of like a dryness to it. drier than some of the other infused oils that I've ever made. So if you have particularly oily skin, I would recommend that. If you don't, it's still really amazing and you can combine it with other things.
With the oily skin, is that even using like the same carrier oil that you usually use?
Yep,
Interesting.
exactly. I always use jojoba oil. You can mix it up too, with whatever you like, but I always use jojoba, and I just find that it doesn't leave my face as greasy as some of the other oils, even when I'm using the same carrier oil.
One other big essential oil that I love for emotional support is citrus oils.
Mm.
And they just have such a way, and Erin mentioned that I'm here in Michigan, and it's so gloomy and dark out, and we have really long, dark gray winters. And I had really bad seasonal affective disorder. I don't like calling it fully a disorder, but that seasonal effectiveness would really hit me through the winter months. And when I first found essential oils, I was like, this is called wild orange. It is just, I call it a bottle of sunshine. Like, it just brightens my mood, everything so much. And it's just so uplifting. So, that is another one. There's like the calming emotional oils, but then sometimes when you're in a really heavy, dark, stagnant energy, you really want like a bright, uplifting one to kind of help cut through some of that fog that you might be experiencing. So, always, when in doubt, especially in the winter, pull on those citrus oils.
Great tip. I love that. And I remember for my birthday, I think like my 30th birthday, you gave me a bentonite clay mask with bentonite clay, obviously. It's good for detoxification for those listening. And I think it had chamomile flowers in it and some sort of essential oil too. So I loved that you created that too. Another creative thing you could do with essential oils and or dried herbs.
They are really cool to pair together. That's what I was just kind of coming through as you said it. It's like, even though essential oils come from plants, it's like they're so cool to just pair together and to see how you can amplify them even more.
You started with herbs and plants in the kitchen. You moved to doing more essential oils. And then how did your relationship with plants and herbs evolve from there?
From there, I'd say the next kind of iteration was testing my hand at gardening. And because I always used to, like, anytime I lived on my own, I couldn't keep a succulent alive. And so I again took on the mindset of, like, I can't grow anything. Like, it's just not in the cards for me. Other people can do it, I can't do it. And it's just a learning curve. It's different, and like no matter where you are, there you got to check your light, your water, your soil. Like there's so many variables. So even if you've tried something multiple times and you feel like, oh, I just can't do it, it's not for me, keep trying, because you'll find your groove, you'll find the plants and different things that you really mesh with or mesh with your climate and your lighting situation best. And so like if you have that kind of pull that you want that fresh greenery around, because it has so many, not only when you consume them and you use them on your body and in your body do you have the benefits, but even just when they're in your space, they're helping clean the air and detoxify it. And so if you have that little yearning in you that you want to have fresh growth and plant life around you, like keep trying, because I thought I couldn't grow anything, and turns out I just gotta keep trying.
So you were trying to grow your own like veggies or
Yeah, so when I moved back to Michigan, we created a garden in the backyard, and first it was like a potted garden, so that was mainly herbs that we were going to be using, so sage, thyme, cilantro, um, rosemary. We had some like a different types of sage. We had like a chocolate sage that was really beautiful smelling. Um, we had lemon verbena, and I'm obsessed with how that one smells. Like if you just like take your hands up it and then smell, it's so bright and fresh. So if you've not grown that, highly recommend growing lemon verbena. I haven't used it too much to make teas and different things out of, so that's where I've mainly cooked with them. But I want to start. There's just so many ways, right? And sometimes we can get like on ourselves with time. Be compassionate and gentle on yourself. If you're like, well, I'm doing some, but I'm not doing everything that I want to do. It's like there's a lot happening in life. Just allow it to be the moment when it's the right moment for you. But then, huge fan of growing tomatoes because I love garden tomatoes. There's just so much better than a store-bought tomato. It was like starting to play with stuff and kind of seeing what our soil was like, our light was like, and it felt so good to be out there. Like, even though I wouldn't always want to go weed the garden, it was the most stress relieving task ever to be in the sun, the fresh air, to hear the birds, to have my fingers in the dirt, and just like to hear the sounds of roots as you're pulling them out. There was just something so cathartic and so being in the present moment when I was doing it.
I so agree. I don't know if you saw, and to everyone listening, my husband and I just built a garden box on our patio. We had this wall that we built, and we took the wall down and built a 4x8 garden bed. And so we have a bunch of stuff growing in there now. We've got, oh my gosh, I could just talk for 5 minutes about the things that we have growing. A lot of greens, beets, herbs, things like that. But I totally agree. There's just something about going out there. I mean, even during my work day, just taking a 30-second break to go out, look at the garden, take in some fresh air, take in some fresh sunlight. And then coming out in the morning and looking for the new growth. Like, it's such a primal, beautiful connection that I haven't found any other way to really get that, whatever nourishment that provides me. I haven't found any other way to get it.
No, I totally agree. And I think speaking to what I said earlier, it brings us back to that sense of oneness of just like, we don't have to try so hard. Like, it's naturally happening. You just get to show up for it each day and really witness it. And obviously, yes, there's little tending that we can do to it. But if we just let it be, it's going to do its thing. We don't have to interject or get in its way or think we've got to do it like all these special ways in order for it to work. It's like, no, it can be so raw, primal, instinctual. And that's where, for me too, there were so many beautiful mindset reminders for me of like, even when you don't see the growth happening, right? Like, you can sit there and stare at it and it's like you see nothing happening other than like the wind, but it's slowly growing. And even just that day's time, you notice it. But in that moment when you're staring at it, and we can get so hard on ourselves in our lives of, I'm not moving fast enough, I'm not growing enough. And it's like, but so much growth is happening underneath that you're not even honoring. So for me, it was just so many good mindset reminders to not take myself so seriously.
Yes. Oh, it's such a great metaphor for life. What is that quote that's like, everything in nature happens in its right time, yet nothing is rushed, or something like that? Something about there's no rushing in nature and everything that needs to happen happens. And it's like, oh my gosh, that's such a great reminder for those of us living in this culture of just like rushing and pushing and, trying to like make things happen. And not to say that we don't take action, right? Not to say that we don't take action, not to say that we don't do the things that we need to do to move our life forward, but that there's also this receptivity in like just trusting that there is growth happening beneath the surface, as you said, and that we don't have to force life. I mean, and circling back to the human design conversation, I don't know what your human design is, but I'm a generator, which generators are like 70% of, the world. And so for those listening, if you haven't looked into human design, I would highly recommend that you check it out and just pull your chart for free. And the generator's strategy is not to initiate and to go and make things happen. The generator's strategy is to respond. The generator's strategy is to nourish the joy and the light within, because that energy is a magnet for opportunities to come your way. So for me, that has been a huge lesson as someone who's just thought, oh, I have to initiate, I have to make things happen. There's all this conversation, especially in the, personal growth community, and about manifesting, which I think has in some ways taught me, at least, that I have to like force and initiate life and do in order to create any momentum or create any growth. And for me, one of the biggest lessons that I'm learning from nature and plants, and also just the struggles that I've lived through in my life, is that there is things to do, of course, and like lean back and trust that life is happening. It's all happening. Like you don't need to force it. It's going to happen in its divine timing, just like the tomato is going to ripen in its divine timing, you know?
Mm-hmm. So true, right? We sit there and it's green, it's green, it's green, it's kind of weird greenish, not so green anymore. And then it just subtly changes as it ripens. And I'm a generator too, and always thought I had to initiate and like all the things, and like I would push and force, and like you said, it's both. It's setting the intention, it's putting yourself out there, but it's also being willing to receive and being ready to respond when it's time. I know that was an interesting one for me, of like breaking that belief of I have to work so hard. It's like, wait, I get to nourish my joy. Like that was such a
Totally. It's not what we're taught. We're taught we have to force life and we have to like friggin' arm wrestle things into being. And it's like, it's exhausting, at least for those of us that are here to respond. It's like maybe for people who are designed that way, that feels good for them. But when I learned I didn't have to do that, I was like, oh, thank God. That feels so much better. So I'm curious, how are you working and playing with herbs and plants nowadays?
Well, I think one of the funnest iterations that I never, ever, ever would have seen my life taking a turn for is that I became a caregiver and I've been growing marijuana. So that is a new level of working with plants and their medicinal properties in a whole new way that my high school self would have been like, wait, what? You're going to do what with your life?
Wow, yeah, because it was probably illegal then. I mean, definitely illegal.
Yep. And I just thought I grew up in such a, um, clean box house. And apparently that wasn't necessarily the case. And I just had to become an adult to learn that.
Oh, yeah, you had to get deconditioned.
Mhm. So it was pretty funny. But that was one of those ones that really broke that belief of I don't have a green thumb. And
Mm.
granted, so because I'm in Michigan and our growing season is so short, we have an indoor facility that's controlled and can make it a little easier to grow. But even still, like the same philosophy and methodology applies. And when I realized I could grow really well in that area, it's like, oh, I just have to, again, keep trying, take the climate, the different things into factors, but you can sustain a plant, you can grow them. And so it was really cool because it really helped to break that belief of I don't have a green thumb, I'll never be able to have a garden, and all of those things.
You definitely have a garden now. It's a different garden than you thought you would have, though.
For sure.
So you're enjoying it?
I do. I think one of my favorite things about growing any type of plant, whether it's tomato plant or it's cannabis plant, is seeing the full life cycle of the biology. And I remember when we had first gotten little potlings and we put them in, and then they grew and we took little cuts off of them to create new plants. And just to see that you can take a cut of a plant and you can put it in a little cloning device, and with certain nutrients and water and like all the right things, all of a sudden you start to see it, that root start to tap, and you start to see it grow, and it kind of looks like a fish scale. Like you got one core tap root and then it looks like little etchings across, and it looks like a fish scale. And to see your one like little leaf and then this huge root under it, when you're like, that was just a cut, like, and now I'm creating an entire new plant. It was so cool to just see like all the different life cycles of the plant.
Wow. So that kind of reminds me of like propagating. I mean, that's what you're talking about, right? It's called propagate. Yeah. So what I've done that with is pothos and a philodendron. So this is a philodendron,
Beautiful.
and these are the little nodes right here, like
Mm-hmm.
this and this. And so you just snip between the nodes. For those who are just listening to the audio, the video version of this podcast is on my YouTube channel if you want to watch what I'm doing. But so I just snipped between the nodes and stuck it in this thing of water. And now look at, you can see this whole jar is all of the roots that have just grown out from just being in water. And then I just, replace and refill this water every now and then. And it's amazing. It's exactly what you're talking about. It's like, not all plants can do that. I didn't actually know that cannabis could do that, but it is so fun and amazing to just watch the magic. Like, it's so cool.
Mm-hmm. You can do it with like romaine lettuce, right? Like if you just cut the butt of the lettuce, I know like you can either replant that, or with avocado seeds, you can just like sit that at the top of water with toothpicks and that starts to regrow. Sweet potato, I think you can do with sweet potato. You just like put a little bit in and then you start growing and it spuds and like all the things. There's so many things. And I think even celery, you might be able to do that too.
So you're working with cannabis right now, you're growing cannabis. And what other ways are you playing with plants? I know I mentioned before seeing you boil, I think, rosemary and some other stuff in some water on the stove. I'd love for you to share about that. And I'd love to hear about any other ways that you're working with plants and herbs that I may not know about. Tell us your magic.
When it comes to our house, a lot of us either have or grew up with Glade plugins, air fresheners, all of these different things to, especially if you have pets, to keep pet smell down and all of that stuff. And they're so toxic for our bodies and our beings, and they create so much hormonal disruption in our bodies. And so one of the ways that I love to kind of shift away from that is there are some toxin-free candles and whatnot, but I love to diffuse essential oils. And then the other way, if you don't have essential oils or a diffuser for them, is you literally just take a little saucepan pot, you put some water in it, and then you take whatever herbs that you have, or you can even do like oranges and orange peels, lemons, limes, anything of that nature, and you just put it in it and you let it simmer on the stove for, you can do a couple hours until the water really evaporates. But that's such an amazing way to fill your house with the most beautiful kind of calming aroma. And even if you do like in the fall, for instance, you could do like a pumpkin spice type theme and do orange peel. You could do cinnamon sticks. You could do clove, star anise, and just kind of have this concoction to create that sense of like a potpourri bowl, but to steam it throughout your whole house.
Yes, I love that. I feel like that would be really good too if you had like allergies or something.
Sometimes our home air can be more toxic than the air outside because we're spraying all of these things, we're using all these chemicals on ourselves, and we're using air conditioning and recycling the air versus necessarily airing out and off-gassing the house. So if you don't have seasonal allergies, highly recommend opening the window and just like allowing the fresh air to pass through. But otherwise, if you have seasonal allergies, that's where I'd highly recommend essential oils. Those first three starter ones that I mentioned, lemon, lavender, and peppermint, if you take a little capsule, it's another cool way to use essential oils is a little veggie capsule. And if you put 5 drops of lemon, lavender, and peppermint in a little veggie capsule and take it, it can act as a natural antihistamine if you do have really bad allergies.
That's a cool tip. I love that.
That was one of my favorite things that I first learned. I was like, whoa, what can these things not do?
Awesome. So yeah, I love the pot thing, the pot boiler. We gotta find a fun name for that.
Right.
Pot boiler, pot steamer is not very glamorous.
Like some type of like crab boil.
Yeah. So that's like basically just making your own diffusion or diffuser,
Yeah.
like a stove diffusion.
One of the other fun ways of like water and herbs that I recently started doing was thyme water, and just putting like a little tea steep pitcher, and I'll put thyme in it and just let it diffuse into the water. And it's a really subtle taste, but it's so great in terms of like antibacterial, antiviral type support. So if you are going through, whether we're moving into cold and flu season, like in September, fall, or you're just coming down on something, that's a really great way to help support your body from the inside out too.
So are you talking about fresh thyme?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then you put it like in boiling water and let it cool, or?
Nope, you could just do it in, I do room temperature water, and I'll just let like diffuse for a day.
Gotcha. Oh my gosh, I love thyme so much. I have some in our garden now, and I go out in the morning and just take a little piece of it and eat it. It's just so earthy and grounding. It's really beautiful. I'm gonna have to try your thyme water.
If you've never heard of medical medium,
Mm,
some people love them or hate them. But to me, again, it's more food for thought. Like take what resonates and let go what doesn't resonate. But for me, that was a really cool one. He's got a book that's I think it's called Healing Foods, but he talks about like the spiritual meanings of certain foods. And thyme water is one of the things that he had recommends from. I think it's specifically the antiviral part and benefits that it has. But I just thought that was another really cool way to learn about food and what spiritual significance and strength can it give us. Again, it's like that same life force energy that we're all made of. So, what are the different ways that these foods can give us additional spiritual armor, if you will, as in addition to the physical nutrients and strength that they give us?
interesting. I didn't know about that. I mean, I know about medical medium, but I've seen I've looked through his liver detox book. That's so cool. I'm into that.
Life changing foods.
Awesome. Okay, cool. That's a great tip. I'll have to look into that.
Again, it's just like, what are we going through in life and what are the additional tools and resources that we can use? Because we got to eat every day, multiple times a day. And instead of it just being this passive thing that you're just doing because you need it to live, it's like, can you tune in? So I guess this would be one of the other ways that I do it that wouldn't be like a straightforward way is tuning in and being present to when you're eating foods, you're eating herbs and like you're talking about that sprig of thyme, when your teeth crunch it and you feel those oils release in it, it hits your tongue, the saliva, there's all of a sudden this experience that you're having, right? But are you present with it? And so, can you, while you're eating these different foods, if you've got a really beautiful fresh salad with all of your garden tomatoes and garden greens and cucumbers, can you tune into like how much of life force that you're like nourishing yourself with and tune into the hydration of the cucumbers and the crunch and like all the different aspects of it and just allow yourself to feel the nourishment. And it might sound weird to like say feel it at a cellular level, but I mean like can you be so present with it that you can feel how deep it's going? So I guess one simple way that you could start to be like, okay, what is she even meaning? Just take hot tea, and it could be with your favorite herbs, and take a sip and tune in to the heat sensation travel all the way down. And again, like just tune in to that feeling. And that's a way to stop being so passive of just like consuming things and like typing, scrolling, and that's like the bodily experiences are happening. But can you really tune in to how much it's shifting and affecting you?
There's some foods that I feel like I can really feel that with in my body, like that are just so rich and nutrient dense. I've been eating a lot of salads since it's springtime, and I like grating beets on top of the salad. And I feel like red beets is one of those foods for me where I'm just like, whoa, if I juice it, if I eat it raw, if I cook it, I can always feel like there's just dense nutrition. And my body's like, thank you. Yes, we'll take that. So it's great to be aware. I mean, we've connected so much around the body and listening to the body and being, in harmony with your body and being aware and grateful. And so, yeah, it's a really beautiful thing when you can become just more aligned with what's happening in your body. And yeah, have so much gratitude and appreciation and awareness for what these different foods and herbs and things and are doing for you. So thanks for
Mm-hmm.
sharing that.
Yeah. And like even though I was going to say they're free, even though we have to pay for groceries or pay for seeds or pay for plants, like there might be an actual cost to it, but there's so many resources to nourish our bodies and to heal ourselves, whether that's sunlight, like that is one that is actually free, but like that is such nourishment for us. And I think the more that you can start to realize that there's so many tools around us that interact with our body that shift our emotional energy, our physical energy, all the different things, and then to start to say like, I'm in a really high stress, anxious state. Instead of me going to consume a Red Bull that's just going to take me higher, it's like, I really need some beets right now because they're going to ground me down. I need some potatoes. I need some tubers. Like, I need those things that grow beneath the surface and downward to help take my energy that's up here and pull me down. And you just start to look at things differently versus like, I'm hungry, I need food. But it's like, but where am I at emotionally, energetically? Is that food going to complement and help me where I'm at, or is that going to spin me out and then I'm really going to be like, oh my gosh, what is happening in my internal world?
There's all of these things, there's these other aspects. There's not just the minerals and the, those things that are the science. There's also, yeah, there's also like the spirit of the plant. I think that's so cool too. And I'm going to have my friend Haley on the podcast next week. And I hope, because I know she's into plant spirit medicine. And I really hope to get into that conversation with her, where she literally will sit with a plant and just ask it to show her its spirit and show her like, what does it do? Like, what is its medicine? Just by sitting with the plant and observing it and seeing, all the aspects of it. So cool.
That's so beautiful. I can't wait to listen.
How has working with herbs and plants enriched your life, aside from the obvious, health benefits that we've talked about? How has working with the herbs and plants made your life better?
Two of the ones that maybe we haven't necessarily touched on are it expanded your perception. Like, even just the way that we were just talking about food, it's not just a blueberry. There's so much within that blueberry. And so it shifts, like, instead of just seeing you as Erin, as someone I know, it's like, I know there's so much of your past. I know there's so much interest. I know there's so much dynamicness to who you are. So I think it's helped expand and not just seeing things on surface levels. I think it's helped contribute to that. And then the other thing for me is just slowing down, because I can run a mile a minute and I can really get onto that hamster wheel of just wanting to do and be all of the things. And so plants really help me just come back to me, to ground, to feel that like, and really just that nourishment. Like, I love taking baths with essential oils, with Epsom salts, which aren't necessarily herbs per se, but they're those elements that everything is still made of, and we get to utilize that for ourselves. So I don't know, there's just like such like an holding, caressing feeling that you get, and just realizing there's so much support everywhere you look. So one of the next things that I really want to get into with my journey with plants is understanding more foraging, and like being able to identify plants in the wild and know like what's good, what should I stay away from, how can I use these. So I would love to learn more about foraging and adaptogens. Those are my next two.
I was at a circle and I was doing a share with this woman, and I was sharing with her about, herbs and stuff. And when I was done, she's like, I love plant people because they know how to go slow.
Oh.
And I just started laughing. I was like, that is so true. That is such the medicine of the earth and such the medicine of the plants. And I love that you brought in too, like that nurturing energy. It is, she is our mother. There's a reason why it's Mother Earth. She is nurturing. And even my interview with Kayla, which is a recent episode that I posted, she talks about how nature is so generous and compassionate, and I just loved that perspective. So yeah, she teaches us how to slow down. She teaches us how to be compassionate, how to receive compassion. She teaches us about generosity. There's just so many beautiful lessons to be had from working with the plants and being in nature and gardening, etc. So yeah, thank you. That's beautiful.
It's so true. But it's like, if you're not willing to see it, you'll kind of see them as a nuisance, right? Like, I love seeing kind of like, not necessarily abandoned cities, but when you have these like built up urban areas and the plants just start to overtake them. I think that's like some of the coolest imagery out there of like it will reclaim and take over. And it's like, you know, if you don't mow the grass is going to grow, and you might just see it as a nuisance of like something that's preventing you from having the life that you want. And it's like as soon as you can get into harmony with them and to stop seeing it as something that's getting in your way from living your life, it's such an expansion and a way to move with more harmony with our earth.
And let's be honest, if nature's pissing you off, you probably just need to slow down.
Oh
You
my
probably
gosh.
just need to chill out.
The number one sign that you need to chill out.
Yeah, right? Oh my gosh, that's funny. So my final question that I'd love to ask is, what advice would you give to someone who's interested in working with plants and herbs, but just hasn't started yet? Maybe they feel a little bit overwhelmed or a little bit like, ooh, can I do this? What advice would you give them, or where would you tell them to start?
I would say start with what is your curiosity is calling you towards, because it's like your curiosity is going to point you to the thing that kind of feels easiest to begin. It might point you to like something that's really complex that you want to learn, but usually within there's like an entry step that you can begin with. It could be infusing oils with helichrysum, like Erin was saying. It could simply be getting different herbal teas and sitting with them and like, brewing 4 different ones and then being like, okay, can I smell the differences, right? I'd say the number one thing, if I had any advice and you were like, I don't know where to start, take off your shoes, take off your socks, walk outside and stand in the grass and just close your eyes and to take in the senses, to breathe in the smells, to feel the physical sensation of what it's like. Because when you ground, that is one of the best ways to feel that relaxation that we're talking about. And maybe even just doing that will be like, well, hey, I did it. What's the next thing that I can do? Because we love to make things in our mind so much more grandiose and harder and more complex than they really are. And sometimes it's simply just going to your health food store and buying an herbal tea and seeing where that takes you.
Is there anything else that you want to share about your journey? I mean, I'd love to obviously hear where people can connect with you if they feel called. Yeah, anything else that you'd like to share though?
No, that feels really good. There's just so many ways. I was getting out of here. I'm like, I don't use plants enough. And now that we talked about all these things, I'm like, you use plants a lot.
Yeah, I know. When you were talking about the essential oils and helping with the emotions and the brain, I was like, she knows some stuff. It's so funny how we do that, how we think that we know less than we do. And I think that's just such a good reminder for people listening too, is like, you know more than you think you do. You're already highly likely working with herbs, and it's okay. Like, you don't have to be a fancy professional. You can just have fun.
Totally. Because we always look at our teachers who know somewhat more than we do, right? And we always know, like, well, I'm not that yet. But we discount how much we are. So remember,
Yeah.
you are a lot. You are enough. And just begin. Have fun.
Yeah. Thank you. Beautiful. And I think even the most experienced person with plants, there's still a ton they don't know. I mean, there is infinite things to learn. So, you know, nobody knows it all. We're all learning. Even the people who you look at and think, oh my God, they know everything. Nope, they still have stuff to learn too. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. If you're listening on the audio version, go check out my YouTube channel at Homebody with Erin. Remember, Erin is spelled with 2 N's. And I will leave all the links to what we talked about and Samantha's Instagram below in the show notes. And thank you so much for joining us. I look forward to talking to you on our next podcast. And thank you so much for joining, Samantha. I love
Thanks for
you.
having me. I love you too. It's so fun.
Yay. Bye.